Hello dear friends, today I am again here with you to share some motivational lecture, motivational points which will benefit you in your life. Topic is frustration causes aggression. Frustration caused aggression is the basic factor in many human tragedies, from personal incapabilities to major wars. Since frustration is a primary ingredient in almost all, some scientists say all, aggression, overt or repressed, it would be useless as well as impractical to attempt to list all such situations here. So let's take frustration is a primary ingredient in almost all aggression. However, it may indicate their variety and magnitude. To list a few of many problems resulting from frustration caused aggression. Infant misbehavior, school failures, juvenile delinquencies, unhappy marriages, business difficulties, disagreeable personalities, minority group, social racial unrest, individual and group protest activities, riots, revolutions and wars are some to mention here. Since the frustration aggression sequence is at the root and usually is the root of many varied and tragic problems, it demands our most serious consideration. It is the principal purpose of this book lecture to stimulate thought, and no attempt will be made here to solve a problem of this magnitude. It simply is hoped that this lecture may, in its limited way, indicate areas of solution and direct your thoughts into channels which should be stimulating and productive. To simplify our approach, let's accept the conclusion of many leading scientists that aggression is always a consequence of frustration. Frustration and aggression. And let us be quick to point out the frustration caused aggression is not always overt and recognizable as aggression, but often is repressed and festers in our subconscious to later appear in some disguised resentment, hatred, antagonistic feeling or misbehavior. We have been taught to suppress openly aggressive acts, but this does not mean that the aggression itself actually is eliminated. It merely is repressed into our subconscious, and unless eliminated can do incalculable harm. Unless eliminated can do incalculable harm. So let's have a closer look on it. An infant is subjected to many frustrating experiences which are all the more acute because the child is too young to understand the reasons for the drastic changes required in its behavior. Complete changes in food, eating habits, personal cleanliness, and toilet training are just a few of frustration which accumulate to provoke the period of frequent and exaggerated stubbornness between the ages of 2 and 4 years, and which usually reaches its peak at the age of 2.5. And then, as the child grows up, There are the frustration of home life, school, and becoming a part of the social system of its group. Each frustration creates aggression, overt or suppressed. Physical measurements, muscular coordination, and intelligence tests show that the average boy or girl at the age of 15 has, by any accepted criterion, the capacities of an adult, lacking only the experience and training which are required by most of us through later years. Otherwise, boys and girls of 15 are adultly equipped to cope with their environment and to take part fully in the society of adults. But boys and girls of 15 years are not considered to be adult by their elders. They are not respected as adults, they are not treated as adults, and usually determined efforts are made to impress upon them their inferior status. Their activities are limited, their independence is not tolerated, and many of the restrictions of childhood remain in force. There is no doubt that many of the usual restrictions and limitations placed upon these young adults are necessary, socially, economically, and morally. The manner and form in which these limitations are imposed are worthy of most serious consideration, because when you treat an adult as a child, no matter how necessary and well intentioned your motives, you cause the most intense frustrations. And aggression is always the consequence of frustration. Now, let's move our spotlight of thought to the subject of unhappy marriages. The rapidly increasing divorce rate is an inadequately lower indicator, quantitatively and qualitatively, of unhappy marriages for too many obvious reasons to discuss here. It is sufficient to state that any marriage counselor will unequivocally assure you that most unhappy marriages are the result of frustration with its accompanying aggression, overt or repressed into the subconscious, where it may reappear as resentment, scorn, jealousy, bitterness, nagging, temper outbursts, easily hurt feelings, and general unpleasantness. So, frustration and its resulting aggressions are the primary causes of unhappy marriages. And frustrations goes on to other areas of life to cause incalculable damage. Business, by its very nature, its complexities, constant personal contact, competition, change, ambition, pressure, is a spawning ground of frustration of every description and magnitude. Not only does business causes frustrations, but it stimulates aggression by requiring competition within companies in the constant building and rebuilding of each corporate power superstructure. When you combine ambitious power struggles at the higher levels, personality conflicts at all levels, and labor management problems ranging from hostile disputes to violent strikes, all within one company environment. You have the ingredients which produce frustration and aggression on a grand scale. Add to the intra-company frustration the competitive aggression of the marketplace, and the result is the well-named corporate jungle. No wonder businessmen have ulcers, nervous breakdowns, and heart attacks. There is no easy solution to ending or even greatly reducing the frustration which is so firmly built into business. It is a part of very nature of business itself, for business is almost totally a competitive, aggressive struggle to achieve superiority or often even to survive. Nevertheless, the elimination of as much business frustration as possible is one of the first order of our time. This must be done or the internal friction it is causing will grind our business machine to pieces. High rewards will go to those who can reduce the frustrations within a business or turn those frustrations into non-aggressive channels. Already much is being done to give competition in the marketplace a game image to relieve some of the frustrations, tensions and pressures of what some sales executives call survival combat. Survival combat. But perhaps the most dramatic example that aggression is always a consequence of frustration is found in the open aggression of minority groups, such as some Negroes in the United States. Here is the perfect example of almost every kind of frustration being accumulated and compounded over many years, until the inevitably resulting aggression has crashed upon the American scene with the release of pent-up hostility, uncompromising demand, provocating demonstrations, threats of violence, and numerous riots. Such mass aggression gives birth to leadership which escalates the group frustration. Some leaders do this with social responsibility and exhortations to non-violence. Other leaders take advantage of the emotional extremism of the type of followers they attract and incite violence, aggressiveness for the sheer exhilaration of their own demonstration of personal power. Undoubtedly, the initial frustration were justified. Undoubtedly, the conditions which caused them should be rectified and will, to a great extent, be elevated in time. However, the violence and hostility of such mass aggression and especially the uncompromising demands accompanied by threats that all these demands must be met in full now has caused extreme frustrations among those millions against whose the aggression is directed. These frustrations have created a counter-aggressiveness which will retard fully accepted solutions to these problems for years, leaving scars of overt and suppressed hatred and ill will like those of civil war. Token and surface solutions may be forced for political advantages, and men of goodwill, working with patience and moderation, will someday alleviate the hostility of the aggression and thus dissipate the defiant counter-aggression which it endangered. It is extremely important to note that all Negroes in the United States were not frustrated, or to the extent to which they were frustrated, they directed their aggression into channels of personal achievements. In either case, their lack of hostile aggression has made possible their acceptance, popularity, acclaim, and accomplishments which have far exceeded those of many white people. For example, there are Negro entertainers, athletes, educators, businessmen, government leaders, and many other Negroes of whom this country is very proud and whom it accepts and admires with a feeling that is entirely non-racial. This acceptance and integration of Negroes as complete equals to whites in every respect is demonstrated in the United States Armed Services. As a direct result of having eliminated the cause, there is no Negro frustration as to their status or acceptance as equal members of the armed forces, and there is no aggressive feeling towards white fellow soldiers. If any frustration exists, the aggression is soon dispelled by necessity of directing it towards the enemy. In the armed services, the equal, integrated, accepted, unfrustrated Negro has distinguished himself with skill, courage, and heroism, which has won the admiration of his white comrades and the entire nation. When you compare the unfrustrated, successful Negro in civilian life or the unfrustrated, heroic Negro in the armed services with the frustrated, social, aggressive Negro demonstrating, protesting, rioting in the streets, you have a dramatic example of frustration aggression cycle at work, and you can clearly see that a frustration is eliminated, aggression is eliminated. You can analyze this on a much larger scale as a cause of wars between nations. Nations, because of strong nationalist feelings, ethnic incapabilities, desires to be superior, and just plain greed, tend to actions and pronouncements which often cause frustration in other nations. The national frustration causes aggressive feelings in direct proportion to the degree of frustration. Too often, instead of diminishing or eliminating the frustration and the aggressive feeling which it provokes, each nation escalates the frustration aggression cycle. The more the frustration aggression is escalated, the less it is repressed, and the more overt and openly hostile it becomes. Unless this escalation is stopped or controlled, the ultimate result in war. And so now we have examined frustration caused aggression from its early appearance in infant behavior, more adolescence, through adolescence problems, unhappy marriages, business difficulties, group protests, and international relations. The list could be endless, but the categories discussed are sufficient to develop three conclusions. 1. Aggression always is a consequence of frustration. Second, since frustration caused aggression usually is at best disagreeable and at worst disastrous, it should be avoided or eliminated unless. Third, the existence of the specific frustration aggression is preferable to the consequences of avoiding or eliminating it. The first two conclusions should now be obvious. The third should be emphasized, lest this lecture be interpreted as suggesting that tranquility be preserved at any price. Therefore, before we examine various methods of avoiding or eliminating some of the frustrations which cause overt or repressed aggression, let us acknowledge that there are frustrations which we should not try to elevate by submissive permissiveness, because the consequences of such permissiveness would be far worse than the aggressions resulting from the frustrations themselves. A few brief examples will suffice. A. Your young, inexperienced teenage daughter insists on staying out on dates as late at night as she chooses. If you restrict her dating hours, you will frustrate her desires, which include her status in her group. The result of the frustration will be shown in her aggressive attitude towards you and result in unpleasantness in the home. However, you prefer that to the social, moral, and other dangers which might result from her late dating. So, you restrict her dating hours and accept the result of the frustration aggression caused by your restriction. B. Racial minorities whose frustrations are justified and should be relieved often have had their frustrations dramatized and further provoked by power-seeking leaders. This has caused such rapidly escalating aggression that they demand that all their grievances will be redressed now, without regard for the chaos, frustrations and counter aggressions. Their threats and urgent demands have be on the community. Many communities have not been panicked or stamped dead, but they have chosen to restrain the frustration aggression of the incited minority groups while patiently and intelligently working to solve their problems with moderation and temperance through cooperation. C. In an international relation, certain countries greedy for more territory and power have claimed territory belonging to other countries. They incite frustration and aggressiveness among their own people and use this as a basis of threat. Nations capable of defending their presently established boundaries would be foolish indeed to succumb to such pressures of self-incited frustration aggression on the part of their neighbors. It would not only be irrational but suicidal to retreat at every threat of an aggressive neighboring country. It is important that I am not an advocate of the psychology. It is apparent that I am not an advocate of the psychology of submissive permissiveness in any category from child rearing to international relations. I believe that discipline, especially self-discipline but imposed discipline, if necessary, will ultimately form stronger character than permissiveness. I have little patience or respect for those who use the frustration aggression sequence as a threat. That include the child, teenager or adult who says or demonstrates, unless you permit me freely to do whatever I want to do, I shall be frustrated, and as a result, I shall be aggressive in many feelings and reactions. We hear that same type of threat from some leaders of racial minority groups who say, in effect, we have a long and frustrating demands of wants, and unless we are given everything we want now, our frustration shall become aggression in varying forms of violence depending upon the extremism of the leader and his followers. And we shall be impelled to cause chaos, riot, and revolt in the community. Now, that kind of threat, and especially the immediacy of the demanded benefits, may panic some politicians from frenzied token compliance, but it inevitably creates a grassroots counter frustration aggression which eventually retards the deserved improvements which could be gained by a more moderate logical approach. On an international level, nations use the frustration aggression threat against other countries. Communist China currently is providing the most alarming example. Certainly, no other great country is so beset with frustrations. That most of China's frustrations are self-created does not make them less productive of aggressions which are violently hostile internally as well as externally. Of course, frustration is not the only cause of aggression, but it usually is present sometimes as a cause and often a convenient excuse. So, while the avoidance or elimination of frustration may not always be the best solution, it can, in so many instances, be of such great value that we should now see what can be done about it. Basically, the avoidance or elimination of frustration and frustration caused aggression can be accomplished by the following common sense methods. 1. Don't cause frustration in the first place. Discipline yourself to avoid imposing unnecessary restraints and inflicting personal irritations. A. Don't restrict or confine any person or group more than absolutely necessary. B. Don't impede another's progress towards his reasonable objective. C. Don't contradict or argue. Silence is usually more effective anyway. D. Don't annoy. Being annoying is merely giving vent to your own frustrations. E. Don't obviously impose your will. Manipulate the situation so that the other person will think that you want is his own idea. F. Don't belittle, don't ridicule, don't detract from the other person's feeling of importance, his desire to be admired, his favorable self-image. 2. If frustration already exists, eliminate it. Then there will be no further cause for aggression. A. Stop doing the things which have caused the frustration. Subject every action which might possibly cause frustration to the following test. Is this action absolutely necessary, or is it merely an expression of my own personal preference? You will find that most restrictions, restraints, contradictions, arguments and annoyances are not absolutely necessary, and the frustration, aggression they cause could easily be avoided by eliminating them. B. Reason away the frustration by selling the need for or desirability of the restraint or other action which must be taken. Restrictions and other often frustration producing actions need not be frustrating. It usually is the manner in which they are imposed that provokes the initial feelings of the frustration. Properly explained, unnecessary restrictions are accepted as being necessary and therefore do not cause frustrations. It is the parent who proclaims, "You may not do this, you may not do that," without explanation, and too often without a logical reason possible of explanation, who causes frustration aggression in children. C. Immediately follow a frustration creating action with a substitute offer which, if possible, is equal to or more desirable than the necessary restriction. For example, management says to labor, "We cannot pay all the wages increase you ask, but we can modify your pension plan to provide even more money when you will not when you will most need it." Or the parents says to the teenage daughter, "You cannot have a date tonight because you need to study for your math exam, but you can have a birthday party at the club Saturday night." D. Take an opposite position to that which caused to the frustration. For example, if you have caused a feeling of frustration, aggression by belittling a person and thus reducing his feelings of importance and damaging his precious self-image, take an opposite position. Openly express your admiration for his good qualities, repairing the damage to his self-image by commendation and praise, tactfully and sincerely done. This will erase the frustration. E. Eliminate or reduce the feeling of frustration. Remember, it is not what happens to a person, but how he feels about what happens that really counts. Thus, if you can induce the feelings that the restrictions, restraints, or whatever are not of the great consequences, if you de-emphasize their impact by not making a major production out of them, you to the extent directly de-emphasize the feeling of frustration. 3. In some cases, you must eliminate, divert, or suppress aggression first before eliminating the frustration which caused it. Always, you eventually must eliminate the frustration too. Here are some ways by which you can eliminate aggression. Psychiatrists call it catharsis. This means that you drag the feeling of aggression out of the subconscious, expose it in the open, give it full expression, and it will use itself up until it no longer exists. D. Don't let aggressive feelings get started. Use the same preventive methods just recommended for preventing frustration. Suppress the aggression until you can eliminate the frustration which caused it. Overt aggression can be suppressed in direct proportion to the severity of inescapable punishment. However, suppressed aggression leads to more frustration, which leads to more aggression. So don't suppress the aggression long and work rapidly to eliminate the frustration which caused it. D. Channel aggression into beneficial activities, useful purposes. Aggression is not in itself evil or undesirable. Aggressions can stimulate terrific energy which, if directed into worthwhile channels, can lead to great achievements. Many a mediocre person have become so aggressive against the frustration of life which were holding him back that he attacked his problems with such energy and determination that success was inevitable and his life goal was quickly attained. We have tried in this lecture to outline some of the facts about the frustration aggression cycle, which is such a powerful factor at all levels, from infant behavior to international relations. In so limited space. It was not my purpose to fully solve many of the problems outlined, but we hope have kept the promises in the title of this book and give you some thoughts that you can build on.